Hi, and welcome back to the Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my thoughts and notes and tips and just general what have you as I DM my party of brave players through Out of the Abyss, which is the 5th edition Underdark adventure. It's not an actual play. I don't go blow by blow. It's more like kind of a summary of what happened in the most recent session, and then just kind of tips and thoughts on DMing it and DMing in general. So if you're new, thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe. But even if you don't, I hope you get some benefit out of this video. And if you're a returning viewer, thanks so much. I really appreciate my returning viewers as we go on this journey together. So with that being said, let's dig right in. Before we get to the actual recap, I always do a little bit of viewer feedback. So let's do some viewer feedback, and then we will jump into what happened last week. So let me put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback. And away we go, as they say. So let's see here. Still trying to get used to this microphone setup and everything. Let's take a look here. I think last video I was looking away because I was reading a screen and it was affecting sound quality. So, and I'm hoping to get things figured out to the point where this big mic isn't just dominating the video. I'm still learning how all this works. I don't really want the mic to be showing in the video. But anyway, if you're into mics and you like looking at the mic, then enjoy it while it's there. And for those of you that are curious, that's a Yeti. It's a Blue Yeti. So, which are pretty popular USB microphones for podcasters and whatnot. Okay, so for video 56, Vasily Krisan said, "Sounds like it was a fun session." I guess if by fun you mean it was a bit of a beautiful mess as I attempted to keep up with the players going different directions than I wanted, and a big burly brawl breaking out that didn't go the way that I had planned for, then yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think the players had fun, and that's the important thing. I did have fun, but as we discussed last video, it didn't go, the way I wanted. So what have you? But that's D&D. I mean, the next comment here from Rob Plummer says, laugh out loud, Shane. I couldn't even count the number of times my players have gone off script. I think they're headed, and they go in a totally different opposite direction. I just try to prep several areas now, but I can wing an area since I read through everything several times before running the adventure anyway. Good luck anticipating your group's move again. Likewise, what we consider mundane magic items, the players always come up with great ways to use. I love their ingenuity. And he's talking about that decanter of endless water that the players ended up with last session. I think at the very beginning of last session, the Deep Gnomes gave it to him in gratitude for them rescuing him from the Grey Dwarves. So it says right in the description for the decanter of endless water that you can use it kind of like a fire hose, and target a character, and they have to make a saving throw, and if they fail it, they get knocked prone. I don't think there's any damage involved. Maybe if you smash them into an object or a wall or something, I'd have to go look. But what was amusing was that was immediately where the players' minds went, because I'm thinking, oh, this would be helpful in the Underdark. They have a decanter of endless water, and they immediately, as players will do, saw the offensive capabilities of it. As far as players going off script, that will definitely happen, and I do somewhat, make sure that I know a little ways ahead on what I think the most possible paths that they'll follow are. I guess in this case, I just assume since Yantha Coaxrock is in immediate danger and they already had a connection with Yantha, that they would go that way. So I'm more prepared for them to go to the Grey Dwarves Enclave instead of going to the Zentarum meeting. Although, I kind of hooked them on the Zentarum meeting because, they had heard that there was an important meeting supposed to happen. They know they're supposed to, the whole reason they're in Mantol-Derith is to connect up with the Zentarum representatives so they can learn how to get to Graven Hollow, which is the Stone Giants library, which is, sort of the MacGuffin at this point, moving things forward. So, I could totally understand why they went that way. And I still have to determine after this session, they still haven't gone to the Grey Dwarves. I assume they'll do that next because they keep mentioning they need to go save Yantha. I still need to determine will I keep Yantha alive since they delayed, going to her. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So Rob, as always, thanks for your comment. Let's see, Isaac Gordon. Nope. This is video 25. I'm gonna jump past that. Mike Fuller. This kind of ties into what I was just talking about. He said 100% yes to the party's decision not to save Yantha immediately, causing her demise. Would love to hear how to fix the players. Moral dilemmas are always memorable. Maybe they uncover the truth about the gem, which exonerates Yantha, only to arrive just after she is lowered into the Zorn's maw. And that is, I mean, basically Yantha at this point is, like in a James Bond death trap or a, Batman, 60s Batman death trap being, kind of lowered down to the maw of this Zorn, and she's wearing a gem-encrusted dress. So the Zorn wants to eat the gems, but he'll crunch her while she's at it. So because the Grey Dwarves are trying to get information, like, where's the gem? They're trying to force her to reveal the location of this gem. I'm going to go ahead and jump back because this is just such an interesting discussion that I had with Isaac Gordon. He commented on video 25, and he said, in my session, we had a dwarf champion put Globagul on his shield and launch a projectile weapon. What are your thoughts on that? And so I was like, okay, are you saying that you got a dwarf champion with a shield and you put a large gelatinous cube on the shield and then launch the gelatinous cube? Because if you remember, Globagul is a sentient, like a sentient to the point where it can talk to you telepathically, sort of newly awakened because of the madness in the Underdark gelatinous cube. So what I said, are you saying that if the player puts Globagul on his shield and launches him as a projectile? I said, if so, giving Glob's large size and, sort of oozy nature, I said he would literally ooze around the shield and onto the player. I said there'd be extremely difficult or not impossible to pull off. However, there's always the rule of cool, which might persuade a DM to allow it. I personally probably wouldn't. Because also, like if you push into a gelatinous cube, you'll push into it. I mean, it's not a very firm, boundary, membrane. I mean, from what I understand, you can reach into a gelatinous cube. It's typical. You're in a dank, dark dungeon, and you see what is that coins floating in front of me? Let me grab them, and then you're like, because you've reached in and you're being dissolved by the cube's very nature. So then Isaac responded and said, I guess he viewed him more like jelly than ooze. And I said, well, that's fair enough, but even then, gelatinous cubes, they're large. They're a large creature. So again, I don't see how you would get it onto a medium creature shield. I mean, I guess the gelatinous cube, especially Globagul, who is intelligent, if they were on board with a plan, could try to, because they can form pseudopods. Can they form pseudopods? Yeah, I think they can form pseudopods. Could try to hold themselves in some sort of shape and not ooze around and onto the dwarf. But anyway, it's just kind of a weird. But the rule of cool. If the DM and the player are cool with it and it's fine, go for it. I'm pretty sure I would not, unless there was something else going on, some other sort of magics or something to help keep Globagul sort of in that stable shape while he was on the shield. And then, I'm sure they have weight. I mean, how much does a gelatinous cube weigh? So these are the things that DM, when players come up with these crazy plans that they're like, oh, this would be so cool. The DM's got to stop and think, well, okay, so how much does a gelatinous cube weigh? Would it dissolve the shield? Would it ooze around the shield onto? How far could the player launch the gelatinous? I mean, there's so many variables. But at the end of the day, D&D is a game of imagination. There are rules, but it's also imagination. So if everyone's on board with it, and the DM comes up with a quick way to do it, sure, go for it. So anyway, that is the viewer feedback for this video, and I'm going to take off my +3 spectacles. Viewer feedback, and we will move into what happened last session. Okay, so One thing I also do, if you're new to this series, if rules questions come up with my players during a session, I'll try to address those, and I'll usually do that kind of towards the beginning of the video. And one of the things that came up was dual wielding, and I don't think in this series that I've talked about 5e dual wielding, you know, how it works, and I had a player that they have this character named Grimy Peters, who's kind of this nasty dwarf rogue, but he's almost kind of half gnome. He likes to play with stuff, and he has this big sort of pipe wrench kind of thing, but he uses it as a club, as a mace, if you will. But he also wanted, you know, like, oh, I've got a little dagger. So I'm dual wielding. And the question came up, you know, there's always that one player that, you know, really always keeps the rules in mind. Is like, well, what kind of weapon is your pipe wrench? And he had asked me before if he could just say that it was basically a mace, a non-magical mace. I said that'd be fine. And then, you know, it came out, it's like, oh, well, a mace is a non-light weapon and you're trying to dual wield. So, you know, might have an issue here. So at the time, and this is what I normally do if stuff comes up in mid game, especially if another player interrupts a player and points out rules, then I'll say, okay, look, here's what I'm going to do. I will allow it now, and then I'll research it outside of the game, and next session we'll follow up or whatever. Actually, I'm trying to get to where we have a private Facebook group where I'm trying to follow up on the private Facebook group. So anyway, but I actually forgot to do it on the Facebook. So at the beginning of the last session, we, you know, clarified all this. So here's the dual wielding rules, or the multi-weapon rules, or whatever, for 5th edition. They're pretty straightforward. Now, in previous editions, you know, unless you were like a certain class or had a certain feat, then you pretty much could not dual wield without massive penalties. 5th edition, in keeping with the sort of streamlined nature of 5th edition, is a little bit different. So on page 195 of the player's handbook, under melee attacks, it says 2 weapon fighting. It says when you take the attack action and attack with a light melee weapon that you're holding in one hand, so you have a light melee weapon in one hand and you've taken the regular attack action with it, you can use a bonus action to attack with a different light melee weapon that you're holding in the other hand. You don't add your ability modifier to the damage of the bonus attack. That's the bonus attack, unless the modifier is negative, in which case you would apply negative damage, but you don't apply positive. If either weapon has the thrown property, you can throw the weapon instead of making a melee attack with it. So if you have a thrown one-handed light weapon and you have a standard melee one-handed light weapon, or if you have 2 light weapons, if I'm reading this right, if you have 2 light one-handed thrown weapons, if I'm reading this right. So that's it. That's the 2 weapon rule. It's not by class, it's not by race, it's not by anything. And it sounds to me, because it's just under the melee attack section in the player's handbook, that any character can do that if they qualify with the weapons that they're using. So there's that. Now, there is a dual wielding feat that's on page 165, if I remember right. Got a handy dandy bookmark here. The dual wielder feat. Now remember, 5th edition, you know, the feats, there's not anywhere near as many feats, and you don't get feats as often. You know, if you're human, you can get feats a little bit more than the average character. But, you know, like 3rd edition was like feats everywhere. Honestly, I don't know how 4th edition was because I didn't play any 4th edition. 5th edition is really scaled feats back. And, you know, which I kind of like, because each individual feat is more powerful and more meaningful, in my opinion. But your mileage may vary. Maybe you loved how they did it in 3rd edition, where every time you turn around, you got a feat. Okay. Dual wielder, page 165. You master fighting with 2 weapons, gaining the following benefits. You gain a +1 bonus to AC while you are wielding a separate melee weapon in each hand. So I guess that kind of, you know, you got 2 weapons and you're kind of fending off attacks and attacking with the other. So I'm kind of simulating that. You can use 2 weapon fighting even when the one-handed melee or melee weapons you are using aren't light. So the basic rules on page 195 for two-weapon fighting all deal with is it light or not. And the dual wielding mechanic or feat just gets, it doesn't matter if they're light or not. You can draw or stow two one-handed weapons when you would normally be able to draw or stow only one. And that's it. There may be some other Unearthed Arcana or, you know, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or, you know, Xanathar's Guide. There may be other stuff out there that has that is added to that, but by the basic 5th edition rules, not basic, I mean, there's basic rules, and then there's by the rules in the player's handbook, the standard, if you will, stock rules for 5th edition. That's it. That's it for dual wielding. So if you're a dual wielder, then there you go. Or if you want to dual wield, there you go. Now, a lot of times, you know, when I used to play more than I do now, I basically do one-shots at cons. Is basically what I get to play now. In fact, there's a con coming up that I'm a co-sponsor of, or I'm a sponsor of, and doing some cross-promotion with. It's Arkansas RPG Con, and that's on October 21st in Benton, Arkansas. And you can find it on Facebook, or I think it's arpgcon.com or something like that. Anyway, go to Facebook and search for Arkansas RPG Con. And it's the 21st in Benton, Arkansas. I'll be there. And it's, you know, a lot of games, a lot of players. I think it was $7 to get in early, but now I think it's $10 if you haven't already got your tickets or whatever. But there's a ton of games. And it's not a con in the sense of like, there's going to be a million vendors and a million special, it's not like that. It's just, there's going to be a couple of game stores there. There's going to be some like snacks and foods you can buy. I think you have to pay cash because they're trying to keep trying to keep the charges down. And then it's just going to be games all day long, and a lot of different genres and systems. So I didn't even know that I was going to promote that, but there you go. If you happen to be in the Little Rock metro area, Central Arkansas area on October 21st, you know, and you happen to show up and you see me, come over and say hi. So unless I look really upset because like my player just died or something, or my character just died, then don't say hi to me because I can't be responsible for what might happen. You can still say hi to me even if that's going on. The medication is working. So that's what the doctors tell me anyway. All right. Anyway, so back to the video. That's dual wielding. That came up as a rules clarification. Now, this session, we're still in Mantol-Derith. Really, the core of this entire session, it was like a 2.5 hour session, was dealing with this gem in Mantol-Derith that's causing madness. And if things go well, which they did for my party that I'm DMing, you can get rid of one of the demon lords before the big final, you know, confrontation or whatever at the end of Out of the Abyss. Page 132 and 133. You really need to be familiar when you run Mantol-Derith with Fraz-Urb'luu's gem. And if I'm saying that, Fraz-Urb'luu, I don't know, but Fraz-Urb'luu is a demon lord that's literally trapped in a gem. And this gem is making its way through various hands in Mantol-Derith, and everybody who's touching it is basically going crazy. And in fact, this session, 2 of my players' characters went crazy from touching the gem. So read this section on page 132 and 133 in the Out of the Abyss book. But the main thing you need to know is the demon lord Fraz-Urb'luu is trapped in the gem. This demon lord in the past has been trapped by mortals on the prime material plane, and had back in the abyss had created this gem so that if he was ever summoned again against his will, he could I guess flee to this gem, put his essence in this gem, and it would prevent him from being summoned. But what happened was the summoning magic that is part of this adventure that, you know, and we'll find out later why were these demon lords even in the Underdark and, you know, going to break through this, or why are they even here? What happened? But there was very powerful summoning magic, and it was so powerful that even though Fraz-Urb'luu's life essence basically went to the gem just came right along. And so it was summoned with his life essence inside of it. So now this gem is in the Underdark, specifically Mantol-Derith, and this demon lord is trapped inside of it and is kind of aware of what's going on, but can't really do anything, can't exert his will or influence, and can only be talked to telepathically. So that's kind of what's going on. And if you touch this gem, then it is any creature that touches the gem must succeed on a DC 23 charisma saving throw or succumb to a form of indefinite madness as determined by rolling on the indefinite madness of Fraz-Urb'luu table in Appendix D. A creature that succeeds on the saving throw is immune to the madness-inducing effect of the gem for the next 24 hours. The madness lasts until cured, which, you know, you need like greater restoration or something else to cure madness. And there's, you know, indefinite madness and long and short-term madness and all that have been talked about in this video series before. Look in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I think it's in Dungeon Hazards, but I could be wrong, but it's definitely covered in there. So, and if you go to Appendix D in the Out of the Abyss book, there are entries for all the various demon lords, and on page 238 and 239 is Fraz-Urb'luu. Can you see that? So, and he has his own indefinite madness table on page 239. So if they develop an indefinite madness after touching this gem and failing a DC 23 charisma saving throw, you don't go to the Dungeon Master's Guide and roll on that indefinite madness table. You roll on specifically on Fraz-Urb'luu's table. So just, you know, be aware of that when you're interacting with this gem. Now, I'm not going to go through every little backstory of the gem because it's all right here in the book. So go check that out. But suffice it to say that it went through, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 hands, maybe even 5, before the players come onto the scene. And it is the root. It is totally what is at the root of the Duergar, you know, the Grey Dwarves attacking the Deep Gnomes of Svirfneblum in murderous rage. And it is absolutely behind the Drow assassin attacking the Beholder, and that gargoyle that flew in and went, "My beloved," and was trying to save the Drow assassin. That all that crazy stuff going on is absolutely specifically because of this gem. Now remember, there is madness in the Abyss or in the Underdark anyway, because the demon lords are running around. So there's just madness in general spreading throughout the Underdark. You know, and the Fair's Rest and all that is messed up, but this is specifically because of the gem. Okay, so there's the general madness, and then this chapter there's the specific madness of this gem. So another thing to be aware of: if you destroy the gem, of course, that'll prevent other people from falling prey to this specific demon lord's madness. So here's what it says. It says, while imprisoned inside the gem, Fraz-Urb'luu retains his alignment and senses, again, see Appendix D, but loses all of his other attributes and can't take actions. The gem is as big as a human fist and has armor class 10 and 1 hit point, immunity to poison and psychic damage, and immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons. It's also immune to any spell effect that requires a saving throw. While inside the gem, the demon lord can't be attacked, harmed, coerced, or hurt. He can be contacted via telepathy, however. Shattering the gem releases Fraz-Urb'luu's life force, which instantly returns to the demon lord's body in the Abyss. So boom, he's gone. He's no longer a player in this game for this specific adventure. And then if the characters destroy Fraz-Urb'luu's gem, award each of them 1,000 XP. So the players in Mantol-Derith have a couple of opportunities here. One is to prevent further spread of madness in Mantol-Derith, and then also to get rid of a demon lord, so which is a pretty big deal. in addition to that, hopefully they can make contact with their contact in the Zentarum and, find out how to get to Graven Hollow. So I've said all that. Let's go back to the very end. I mean, at the very end of last session, or the previous session, there'd been the big fight between the Drow and the Zentarum, and then the players were kind of in the middle, and there was a beholder that's kind of been maimed and only has 4 of its eye stalks left and is all kind of, messed up because it got in a fight with a Behir when it was younger. And there's a crazy Drow assassin who thinks that, she's been paid to assassinate the beholder, even though she hasn't. There's a dead gargoyle that was my beloved. Now it's dead. And there was one dead Drow elite warrior, one subdued Drow elite warrior, and then the lead negotiator, basically the head of the Drow here at Mantol-Derith, a mage, is subdued. And so that's, we pick up right where we left off. And one player is paralyzed. The Drow assassin is paralyzed by the beholder. And then the beholder was just about to start taking its revenge and literally eating the Drow assassin when Gazram Dulak, who's the lead Zentarum, was like, can you at least wait to eat that Drow until we find out what's going on here? And the beholder's like, oh, very well. So that's kind of where we're at. So what immediately happened is, I had said at the end of last session, I had told the player who got paralyzed, right next to the Drow assassin that was trying to kill the beholder, when they got paralyzed, they dropped the already paralyzed Drow assassin. They were kind of trying to drag away from the beholder. And I said, you notice that not a little bit of black gem kind of falls out of her waist, belt area. And, right now you're the only one who sees that. So at the very beginning of the session, I can't remember who it was, got left. They left the Drow assassin paralyzed, but they unparalyzed the player, that's part of their group. And that player immediately did a sleight of hand or deception or something to grab the gem and hide it. So, and rolled really well, rolled really high on, being sneaky about it. Ostensibly, it was so that the Zentarum wouldn't see it and the Drow or whatever, but, I don't know. I think maybe the player kind of wanted it, but who knows? I'll give them the benefit of a doubt. They said they were doing it so the Zentarum wouldn't see. Anyway, so I said, I went over and looked. I said, hold on a second, walked around, looked at their character sheet, saw what their charisma was and all that, and then walked back around and rolled for them. They failed the roll, so they got a madness. And they're like, oh, boy, that was, I wonder why he was looking at my character sheet. So I love that kind of paranoia-inducing stuff. I don't like to let it go too long, but I do like to kind of mess with characters or players a little bit. So they rolled where they were in they daydream really intensely. And even when they're not daydreaming, they have a hard time distinguishing reality from the daydream and all that. So, I invented this daydream for this character where they were in a cloud. They were in a castle in the clouds, and the other characters were, basically 2 of the other characters were her beloved mistresses who were letting her as a servant come along on their adventures. And then all of the other PCs and Drow and Zentarum and all that were in the daydream, were foot soldiers, were guardsmen, were of the mistresses who are basically princesses. They're men at arms kind of thing. And so they're just like, and they were responsive to the environment, and they were kind of walking around, but they were, it was immediately obvious that, she's gone gaga. So that's kind of how I played out that madness. There was a little bit of metagaming, like somebody wanted to go over and search that player immediately. And I'm like, well, why are you searching that player? Because, the player knows that's wanting to search that character picked up a gem and hit it and immediately started acting wonky. But nobody saw that happen. And in fact, I gave a couple of players I gave them perception rolls to see if they noticed it, and they didn't. And, you know, so I kind of stepped in as DM and interrupted the flow of the game and said, you know, what is your motivation for searching this character? And, you know, when they thought about it, they didn't really have one. So, you know, they didn't. You know, they just want to, you know, cause I just don't like that kind of thing. Well, I'm going to go search. Like, I don't just randomly search people all the time, but I'm just going to go randomly search them because they're acting weird all of a sudden. And, you know, after being paralyzed by a beholder, and you're in the Underdark where madness is known to be happening. So I'm just going to go search this character. And, you know, it's kind of stepped in. And the way I always try to address this is I never say, look, you can do what you want. I'm not going to tell you can't do that. But does that feel right? Does that make sense for you to just go over there and do that? And ultimately they just ended up role playing it a different way, which I apologized, appreciated. So anyway, there was a little bit of, you know, what do we do? And they were tying up the Drow. They were tying up, you know, the Drow assassin. They were, you know, talking with Fraz-Urb'luu. They were trying to figure out what's going on. You know, they were still trying to, hey, beholder, don't eat this lady that just tried to kill you, this Drow that just tried to kill you. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. So in the middle of all this, you know, the Drow started waking up from being unconscious. And, you know, of course the Drow mage, she's in charge, and she's acting very haughty and, you know, acting like, you know, she's in charge and being inconvenienced somehow. And her and Gazrum, the Zentarum lead, came to an agreement pretty quickly. I'm playing him, even though the book doesn't say it like this, I'm playing him very practical and pragmatic. He will survey a situation, try to analyze all the variables, and just find the best way to move forward in a business-like manner. And, you know, the lead Drow, the mage, you know, she's basically like, well, sorry about that, but when my associate here attacked your friend, but talking about the beholder, I just assumed that it was all about to go downhill, and, you know, I wanted to do the best to get my people out alive. And, you know, Gazrum was like, whatever. So it's water under the bridge, basically. None of his people died, so he's cool. You know, and she's a bit embarrassed, you know, but she's trying to overcome it with, you know, Drow arrogance and haughtiness and all of that stuff. So, long story short, they either intimidated or persuaded or something the Drow assassin, who's crazy. She thinks that the gargoyle was an intermediary between her and the regular Drow enclave to hire her to kill the beholder, which is not the case. She's just wacky. She thinks that because of the craziness. The gargoyle fell in love with her because he had the gem and was crazy, and saw her and fell in love with her, and went and gave her the gem as a token of his love. She immediately went crazy and interpreted it as, this was payment for me to go assassinate the beholder. And if I do that, she's been exiled from her house back in Menzoberranzan. And if she does that, then she can go back home and be part of her house again and all this, which is why she's shouting the name of her house for the honor of it, you know, while she's attacking the beholder and all that stuff. And she's even tied up, you know, she's like, glaring at the beholder. And, you know, you could tell, like, if she could inch her way over there and chew on him, she would, you know, she wants to kill this beholder. And the beholder's like, you know, kind of like, wow, you know, and he just wants to eat her. He's mad. He wants vengeance. And he just wants to absolutely disgrace her by just eating her. And, you know, I don't know if a beholder would normally eat a humanoid. I have no clue, but that's how I played it this time, because I just thought it worked well. You know, there's this impending, you better get the information that you want out of this Drow before the beholder eats her. Now, another thing my players were doing, if you'll remember, one of the factions from Gracklestug, is it Gracklestug? No, it's not Gracklestug. It's the Dwarven Mantol-Derith, the Dwarven kingdom in the Underdark. It said, hey, we have a Drow, we have a spy who's disguised as a Drow, and it, you know, talking about from Silvery Moon, and they have a code word of like the reddest of roses comes from Silvery Moon. I made that up. That's not in the book, but there is a Drow or a undercover agent pretending to be a Drow in the Underdark they're supposed to be looking for. You know, and somebody's like, before you kill any drow, make sure it's not our agent. So they're also doing these telepathic checks with all the drow, and I think it's the warlock who has telepathy is using that code word with them, and all the drow just look kind of very puzzled. So, but kudos to them for, you know, playing out that subplot. But that drow that they're looking for is not in Mantol-Derith. Now, there's another person they were asked to look for that is in Mantol-Derith, but they're in like kind of a very external spot, and they're not easy to find. So I encourage you to kind of look at the book if you're wanting to follow up on that. Unless the players just happen to go that way, I'm not planning, because they have to go through like a secret door out onto a beach. Ristia Zav is a chaotic good harper, spy from Nesme who descended in the Underdark. So it's a harper spy, and she's kind of like she's crazy, and she's out on a beach. And then there's another NPC that's also kind of hard to find in Mantol-Derith. His name is Slatus Vader, and I think he's the one that Marista Malkin, from the Emerald Enclave, had asked the players to find Slatus Vader and or Slatus Vadir, and he is in kind of an odd place in Mantol-Derith as well. So I encourage you to kind of, you know, check out those NPCs. And then there's the NPC named Pebbles that wants to collect eye stalks for its beholder master, which is not this beholder in this scene, but another beholder. So there's some NPCs I'm just not dealing with for time's sake. But if my players actively explore areas, you know, and go that way on their own, I will deal with those NPCs, but I'm not hinting them along to find those NPCs. In Pebbles, I just decided to leave out of it completely. You know, it's interesting and everything, but I'm not using Pebbles. So, but make sure to, you know, research the chapter, you know, if for those. But anyway, back to you know, the session and what happened. You know, they were interrogating the Drow assassin. And one thing to remember is there's the Drow mage, who's the head of the Drow Enclave that negotiates here at Mantol-Derith. Then she brought what she thought was 3 Drow elite warriors with her, but one of those warriors was actually the assassin who had infiltrated to get close to the beholder. So, you know, try to keep all that, you know, kind of in your mind. So we got the Drow assassin who kind of snuck into the whole situation and killed the beholder. And they, like I said, they either interrogated her or persuaded her or something. I know that the bard guy, who's the charismatic, you know, persuasive type player or character in the group, which makes sense. It's a bard. You know, got the story out of her that, you know, I was paid to, you know, kill this beholder, and by the Drow, you know, they used one of their gargoyles to be an intermediary, which kind of makes sense because the Drow in Mantol-Derith use gargoyles to protect to kind of keep an eye on their warehouse and all that. So it's, you know, not completely where's the gargoyle come from? There are gargoyles here in Mantol-Derith that the Drow employ. And she's like, I'm supposed to kill the beholder, and then I can go home, you know, and reclaim, you know, my place in my house in Minzo-Bronze and all that. So that's the story they get out. And during this discussion, the gem comes up. Like, they paid me this gem. I want my gem back. You're an interloper. Where is my gem? No, she's like, yeah, they're like, do you have proof? And she's like, well, look in my belt. I have the gem. And of course they search her belt and the gem's not there. And then she starts screaming, you know, thieves, where's my gem? It's rightfully mine. I want it back. And, you know, because all in her mind, she's still crazy. She hasn't been cured. She wants to kill the beholder. She wants the gem. She wants to go home. So at that point, the players role played, there was a gem and it's missing and she's crazy. And now our other person who was touching and messing with her has kind of gone crazy. Let's search her and see if she has this gem. And I'm like, makes sense. So of course they found the gem. And another player they found the gem, and another player was like, well, I'll grab it or something. It wasn't very well thought out. And I said, okay. And so they grabbed it and they're kind of holding it. And I said, roll, and they gave me a roll, and they failed, but I didn't have the madness kick in at that very second. They developed a madness where they go catatonic. And to have, I think, like vision, or what is it? You got to go to this Fraz-Urb'luu. Let's see if I can find it. Intermittent hallucinations and fits of catatonia. So, they're like looking, and everybody's talking and whatever, and they're looking like, what's the big deal with this gem? That's a big gem. It's very dark, strange. And everybody's, the Drow, the Zentarum, and the players are all kind of looking at this gem and talking about it. And a few minutes into that, I had the player who was holding the gem just go catatonic. And it took a moment for everybody to realize that they were no longer responding, and they were just kind of staring. Because at one point, the player that was playing that character said, well, I say this or I do that. And I go, actually, you don't. You're just kind of like that. And then, they're like, oh. And then everybody realized that they were kind of catatonic. So they had... the warlock has sort of an innate detect magic. I think it only they see the detect magic effect. It's kind of a, detecting or some kind of sight or something like that. And the warlock at that point threw detect magic on, or their version of detect magic on this gem. And this is not in the book, but this is what I did. All right. I thought this was a nice thing to do. I said the detect magic on this gem, it glows incredibly bright, like the sun. I mean, you're just almost like blinded, because detect magic, it makes things glow that are magic within a certain, like radius and for a certain amount of time. And so the warlock is like, whoa. And it's obvious by the warlock's reaction that something's up. And the Drow, and this wasn't the first time she did this, the Drow mage was like, care to clue us in? And so she threw detect magic, and then everybody sees this, whoa, that just made, because you got this gem that was crafted by a demon lord, and it's got the demon lord's essence inside of it. So I just ruled, I mean, it's just blazing, and I just thought that was kind of a nice effect to do. And they, everyone's like, whoa, this is really, really big stuff. So there was some discussion. What do we do? What do we do about this? It's actually causing a problem. And this, I kind of had fun with this as the DM, because the players at one point, one of the options was like, well, let's just take the gem and figure it out later. And, they're like, Burp, and the Drow and the Zentarum are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because the players are like, oh, it's loot, we'll just take it. And the Zentarum and the Drow are like, no, you're not just walking off with this gem. And I think that kind of threw the players off, because they're just like, well, we'll just be murder hobos and loot and go. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, because I felt that that's how the Zentarum would be. They're like, this is our turf. You're not just going to grab and go, and then also I really kind of wanted, if possible, to resolve the demon lord and the gem thing in this session. So I was kind of killing two birds with one stone. Now the players that absolutely insisted on taking the gem with it and figuring out later, and they wanted to either negotiate or fight with the Drow and the Zentarum to do that, of course they could have, but that's not how it went, which I'm happy about it. We had a nice kind of role-playing session with this. So somebody at one point, because they have two sentient weapons, they have three sentient weapons. They have Dawnbringer, which is the Sunblade that you get in this adventure. And then they have Wave, which is the sentient trident, very powerful, from White Plume Mountain, legendary weapon. And then they have Whelm, which is the Warhammer, also from White Plume Mountain, which is also a legendary weapon. So they have these telepathic object weapons, and the warlock who carries wave was like they took and they kind of, they said, well, can I kind of get the gem on the tines of the trident? I said sure. So they kind of plucked out of the hands, you know, because the players, even like, I got to give credit to the player for like 20 minutes or something just held this pose in character, you know, because they're catatonic, and at one point they had to switch arms, and I didn't tell them to do that, they just did that. I thought it was nice, but anyway, so they kind of plucked the gem out of that character's hands with the trident, and they used Whelm. You know, the player on their own said, well, can we have, and I don't even know where they got the inspiration for this. I'm glad they did. It was great. It saved me from, you know, probably a lot of running in circles. But they said, can we have Wave try to talk to this thing? And I don't know where that, maybe I had said something that kind of prompted them that way or gave them a clue. I don't know. But again, I'm glad they did it. And I don't even know, Wave can telepathically communicate with its wielder. I don't know if it can actually telepathically communicate with other stuff, but in this case, it said sure. And so the wielder can hear Wave talking telepathically, but can't hear the response. So it's kind of like hearing one side of a conversation, you know, and Wave is like, hello, you know, is there anybody home, kind of thing. And then, you know, very quickly Wave was like, yeah, you know, and you could tell Wave was like very like, ouch, you know, this is, wow, yuck. And so then Wave, you know, stopped talking to the gem and then talked to the warlock. And long story short, the Wave talked telepathically to the gem, and then the warlock ended up talking telepathically to the demon lord inside the gem. And then the Drow mage ended up talking telepathically to the demon lord inside the gem. I mean, now it's very nasty, disgusting. I played this as like, you do not enjoy talking to this demon lord. You know, and it's just like overpowering mental presence, and it's just awful. You know, and even Wave was like, kind of like, I need a shower. But long story short, what they ended up working out with the demon lord through the conversation, you know, basically said, you know, I'm trapped in here. And it was more than, you know, it took a while to get to this point, but the bottom line was the demon lord said, I'm trapped in here. I don't want to be here. And if you'll free me, then I'm, you know, he's like, I'm confident that I'll return to the abyss where my body is. And I will owe you. I will give you a favor. And the favor was basically that if you help me escape, then if you ever find yourself on my level of the abyss, then you basically have a get out of jail free card. Not only will you be free from harm one time, you know, you can't keep coming, but if you ever find yourself there, you'll be under my protection, and I will get you back home safely. So that was the deal offered. But the thing was, it led to a lot of discussion, because this demon lord is the demon lord of deception and illusions, prince of deception and demon lord of illusions. So they're like, you know, what can we trust this? You know, because for all they know, if they release the demon lord from the gem, he'll be there. Boom! Suddenly there's a big 12-foot, you know, nasty looking demon lord there on the abyss, or in the Underdark right in front of them. So they're like, what do we do? Now the Drow Leader, let me get her name again, instead of just call her the Drow Leader. What is her name? Sirak Mazalor. She was inclined to believe, because the Drow have a lot of history and interaction with demons, and she believed this. She said, I think that this is true. And she was absolutely enamored with the idea of having a favor from a demon lord. That's a big deal. Huge. So, and that favor, that deal thing isn't in the book. That's something that I came up with. But, feel free to use it. I'm just saying, if you're like, where is this in the book? That's just something I came up with. Because you know, when they're talking with the demon lord, why is the demon lord going to reveal his helplessness or, you know, whatever. So the way I led things, so they're like, oh, if we destroy the gem, the demon lord will go home, was I took it down that path. You know, you could have a better way to do it or a different way to do it, and that's totally fine. Now, so what it ended up coming down to was, and a couple of times the players did try to take the gem, and the Zentarum and the Drow were like, no. You know, they're like, oh, we got a demon lord. It'll be good to have a pet demon lord. And they're like, no, you know, you're not just running off with this gem. So, you know, I think that the players, you know, kept getting caught off guard by that. They think, well, it's our game, and we found this gem, and it's ours. You know, I think that's kind of how they just wanted to add it to their bag of loot. But I want, you know, again, I've already explained why I didn't want it to go that way. If they would have absolutely pushed for it, I would have, of course, allowed it to go that way. But I was hoping it would go to a resolution, and it did. So what it ended up coming down to was the Drow. You know, they basically, the Zentarum, Gazrum-Dulak said, well, let's bring this to a vote. He said, you know, the Drow get a vote, we get a vote, the Zentarum, and then you, as representatives of King Bruenor, get a vote. So let's all vote. What do we do? Now, the reason Gazrum-Dulak did that, it's not that he's definitely a fan of democracy. I did that because then it helped bring the situation forward to a close. You know, let's make a decision. So I used him for that reason, but also that gives him political cover. If the wrong decision is made, then he wasn't the only one making the decision. So when the fallout is going on, he said, well, the Drow are, you know, and the King Bruenor, his representatives, and, you know, so he's looking for political cover as well. So, which is smart leader and politician or whatever. Not that he's exactly a politician, but he's got that kind of approach. So they voted, and the Zentarum voted no. They're like, let's not destroy this gem. And the players and the Drow voted yes. And so they went in, you know, they said, is there like an anvil or something around? And I said, sure. You know, I just said, out in that trades area where all the tin, so there's an anvil. So they went and found an anvil, and I think, you know, they ended up destroying the gem. And I said that, you know, there was like this whoosh, like from Lord of the Rings, like when Sauron is destroyed, or at least his body, and there's that big poof, like at the very beginning of Fellowship of the Ring when they're telling the story of Sauron, you know, that kind of blast. And they heard a voice, like his voice saying, you know, the deal will be, or the bargain will be honored, you know, kind of thing. So that was a nice moment. And the players were like, oh, that's cool. So that's how we dealt with the Demon Lord. So one Demon Lord gone, interesting role-playing session, in the mix. And also, they all got 1,000. Don't forget to give, if they deal with the Demon Lord and release him and deal with the madness, that specific madness from the gem in Mantol-Derith, they get 1,000 XP. So, one other thing that I wanted to get into, that while all this was going on, once they got the story out of the Drow assassin, while they're debating what to do about the gem, the beholder just started munching down on the Drow assassin. And I'm like, you're talking, all of a sudden you hear these horrible munching sounds, and this Drow assassin is screaming, and because she's tied up, and they look over, and the beholder is starting to eat her slowly, feet first. And, you know, it's an awful, gruesome, horrifying moment, which I thought fit into I think the Underdark should have moments like that, especially when there's madness and all that stuff. You know, this can be kind of a very grim adventure, even though it's also whimsical. It's got a little bit of Alice in Wonderland mixed in with it. And they were like, oh, and there was like screaming and yelling. And the Drow mage, the leader, she just went and threw a silent spell around it. So they couldn't hear it, but if you were watching, you were just watching it happen, and it was awful. And there was some discussion among the players, like, should we get in the middle of it? And they ultimately decided that, you know, we're not really in a position to do anything about it. this is kind of the justice of the Underdark with his Zentarum and all that. So they did not intervene in that, and I did not penalize them for that. Because actually at the moment there's higher stakes. There's actually a demon lord right here. And that Drow assassin, even though she was mad, is a Drow assassin. It's not like, she's, Saint whoever who happened to go crazy. I mean, and there is a vengeance debt there with the beholder and all this stuff. So they just decided not to get involved. The other thing that happened, and this brings up what I feel is a very important discussion about player freedom versus the tone of an adventure. While this was going on, the warlock, and the player who plays the warlock will sometimes play their characters very flippantly. They tend to play chaotic neutral characters. And this is the same player, not character, but the same player that, if you watch the White Plume Mountain stuff, there was a scene where there's this pit trap in this frictionless room. And in the middle of it, and White Plume Mountain's it's one of the most deadly, dangerous dungeons in D&D history. They decided to get inside basically a canoe or a kayak and skirt across this frictionless floor and smash into a stone wall as fast as possible just to see what would happen. Well, what happened was they took a lot of damage and got stunned and all this stuff, and then a fight broke out, so they were unable to help in that fight for a few rounds. And, again, I didn't tell them they couldn't do that. I felt that it was a bit whimsical and kind of a weird move tone-wise, giving the serious tone of the adventure. So something like that happened again on this last session, where the warlock has Whelm, or Wave, with the gem on the tines, and the Drow mage is, every now and then she's like, would you care to share? Because at this point the warlock is talking to the demon lord inside the gem and all that, and and the Drow mage is like, would you care to enlighten us on what's going on? And at one point during this, the player who's the warlock said, "Can I reach over and touch her with the gem just to see what'll happen?" And I'm like, well, yeah, you can. And so in the middle of this very serious, situation, very serious scene, just for fun, the player, I feel like, but I guess the character did, chaotic neutral warlock character, just touched the Drow mage with a gem that at that point they all knew had a demon lord in it, and that was causing people to go crazy. So I rolled, and that Drow contracted madness, but the madness she contracted did not manifest. Apparently it was along the line, it's the same one that Yantha has at this point, which is, I won't reveal my true motivations to anybody, which kind of fits with a Drow anyway. So they didn't see an immediate change in her behavior, but the Drow was like, and I made it very clear that the depth of the offense that player or that character had just done was like bad. I mean, it was like the etiquette, the protocol, the I don't even know how to put it. It's beyond manners. The grave consequences of the action she just took for no other reason, just, it'll be kind of neat, was of a magnitude far beyond what it was really able to go into at that moment. And, the Drow mage was like, were it not for the importance of this very moment, I would basically take my revenge now, but this is actually better because I want you to, live for a while knowing that an incredibly horrendous doom will fall upon you by my house and me. And the player was like, is that just me, or is that, the other players too? And she was asking that of our character. And, the other players are like, great, now we're in the Underdark. We had the Drow off of us, and now we got Drow on us again. And I was like, what? Well, I mean, she's definitely furious like beyond furious, coldly furious with you. Like, you know, like it's absolutely stunning and unbelievable what you just did to this drow. So now her and her entire house are your basically mortal enemy, and they're, you know, probably going to slowly take their revenge on you. And you know, the player's like, whoa. So now she did something clever. The player, while they were voting on whether or not to smash the gem and release the demon lord, this player or the character said, I'll tell you what, I'll vote yes, because the drow wanted it. You could tell the drow wanted to release the demon lord and get that favor. And the player was like, we'll vote yes if you will delay your vengeance for a year. And that was actually really smart, because, you know, they're thinking, oh, you know, I think that the character was thinking, hopefully we'll have all this wrapped up and we'll be out of the Underdark by a year. Now that won't stop the drow from seeking vengeance on her, but it'll keep the drow from, you know, descending upon them during the actual Out of the Abyss adventure. So that was pretty clever. Got to give that to her. And the drow mage agreed. She goes, actually, that makes it even better, you know, anticipation. And the longer we draw this out, and the more time you have to think about what's going to happen to you, you know. So the drow mage was like, yeah, sure. So I thought that was actually really cool, but it leads into, I really want to talk about player behavior versus the tone of an adventure. You know, this player has, again, they can play how they want. I'm not going to ask them to change how they play. I'm not going to ask them to not play or leave or anything like that. I'm just sharing my thoughts as a DM. So, you know, if you're the player and you're listening to this down the road, I'm not upset with you or think you're a bad player or anything like that. But I do want to discuss as a DM about player behavior versus the tone of an adventure. Because yeah, you want your players to have freedom. It's a sandbox, it's an imaginative sandbox, but at the same time there's a tone of the adventure, the campaign that's been established, hopefully by the DM and by what's been happening, that you would hope that players would respect, you know, and going, you know, oh, let me see what happens if I, you know, jab this gem that has a demon lord in it that's making people go crazy and touch a high-ranking drow with it. I mean, that's just a, well, let's see what happens. That does not, to me, fit the tone of either that scene or the overall session or the adventure. So now, here's the thing: since we played a store, and I play on behalf of the store, and it helps the store, I'm much more lenient. But if this was like a home campaign I was running out of my house with, you know, my friends or whatever, even though my players are my friends, but, you know, I'm talking about something that's a little bit more intimate and a little bit more about me and my house and my group, and not just on behalf of the store, I'd probably, you know, take more pains to say, you know, I don't, or maybe talk with that player outside of the game. So it just doesn't fit, because there was another time that, you know, like their player will die, their character will die, and they'll go, cool, my player gets to die. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's, you know, it's just kind of a jarring reaction or action or style of play in a serious adventure. And I don't feel that, especially the way they did it, because they weren't like, maybe I can get advantage in this negotiation by making the drow go crazy. They were just like, oh, let's see what happens. Touch, you know, like a whimsical, ooh, cuckoo kind of thing. And it just like, wow, it just did not seem to fit. You know, especially this is like a warlock that has a pact with some like Cthulhu-like creature or something. It just didn't fit. I didn't, you know, and then, so I think it's okay for times at DMs to go, you know, there's a tone here. You know, there's a tone. And if people are, or, you know, if they're not taking stuff seriously, like, oh, I don't care if my player dies. It's like, well, you know, why are you playing? I mean, what investment do you have here? If you don't care about consequences, then how are you enjoying the threat or whatever? I don't know. I mean, obviously they enjoy the game because they keep coming back, and they're a great player. I like to have them as part of the table, but there's just moments every now and then where it's just, whimsical or silly. And like there's some campaigns or there's some games or groups or one shots or whatever that are intended to be lighthearted and goofy and fun. And even in hard sessions that are dark and grim, or campaigns that are dark and grim, you know, there will be times of fun at the table no matter what. But there's just overtly silly, goofy stuff like I've described, you know, with the kayak into the wall and the you know, and touching the drow. I don't know. I just, as a DM, I don't really like it, you know, not to the point where I'm going to step in and say, you can't do that. Especially, you know, like I'm running at a store. But you know, I just would, if you're a player out there and you're listening to this, maybe consider the tone, of the adventure, and kind of the other players at the table too, because when you abruptly do something like that, it can interfere with willing suspension of disbelief, which is crucial for role-playing games or novels or movies or TV. It can mess with somebody's involvement, you know, like the mental space they've gotten into, even if it doesn't mess with their suspension of disbelief. Maybe they'll think it's funny, maybe they won't. But, you know, just again, it's like the I've talked about it a couple of recent sessions. Like, I'm just going to go off on my own and split the party. You know, really think about it, you know, before you do it. Is it that important? Is it as important as you want it to be? You know, consider the bigger picture, the context, that there's other people at the table with you. There's a DM that's trying to, you know, tell a certain type of story. There's other people at the table. So, and if you're a DM and you know, I'd welcome your thoughts on this. Is it not a big deal? Do you dislike it like I do? Do you encourage it? How do you address it? You know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'm gonna double check my notes here, but I think that's it for this video. Make sure that we have, yep, I think that's everything. So thanks so much for watching the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss notes series. Please consider leaving this video a comment on YouTube, a thumbs up. That helps a lot. Even a thumbs down. I don't want a thumbs down, but interaction helps my videos a lot. And please consider subscribing to the channel, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays.